Last time, a rebellion was born in whispers and shadows. Led by the resourceful Sun Guer, a band of militiamen launched a clandestine interrogation, not with crude torture, but with a brilliant psychological gambit. By feigning knowledge, he shattered the captives' defenses, uncovering a devastating truth. Their own great commander had colluded with the steppe tribes, sending thousands of their brothers to die as cannon fodder against the Han's terrifying artillery. After silencing the captives, a new horror arose. Unseen Han scouts staged the scene, creating a headless mystery that sent waves of terror through the camp. But fear bred audacity. Sun Guer unveiled a daring plan: surrender. He then vanished into the lion's den, returning with a report that defied all propaganda. He had met the Han generals. He had seen their benevolence. They weren't monsters. They were feeding their prisoners better than the Xian fed its own soldiers, and even caring for the elders their tribe had abandoned. In one night, the enemy had become more righteous than their own leaders, igniting a full-blown crisis of faith from within. Xue Qingyao's psychological ploy was spectacularly effective. When the militiamen heard that the Han army, far from carrying out a massacre, was actually aiding the old, weak, and young they had left behind, a whirlwind of emotions churned within them before settling into a potent mixture of admiration and gratitude. Gods above, the Han tribe is that decent. A young lad shot up from his straw mat, his face flushed with excitement. What are we waiting for? Let's sneak out and surrender tonight. We can get home to our wives sooner. With that, he scrambled to leave. But when he turned, he found every man in the tent staring at him with the kind of look you'd give the landlord's dim-witted son. Tonight? And where exactly do you think you're going? An older man grumbled, shooting him a sideways glare. What about the rest of us? Don't you want the grain back that bastard Great Chief tricked us out of? And your wife and kids back in Clearwater Valley? Oh, that's right. You don't have any. The rapid-fire barrage of questions hammered down on him, and the youth deflated like a punctured ball, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. He had only just come of age. His family had been arranging a marriage for him, but this damned war had ruined everything. A bachelor through and through, with only his own mouth to feed, he couldn't possibly grasp the bitter struggles of these older men with families to support. Everyone, calm down, calm down. Seeing the mood in the tent about to hit rock bottom again, Sun Ji quickly stepped forward, clapping his hands to command the room's attention. We need a proper plan for this. The Han tribe has agreed to take us in, but they're not running a charity. There are conditions. Besides, Elder Jean and his men still need our cooperation. We can't just think about saving our own skins and abandon the brothers in the other camps, can we? He paused, his sharp gaze sweeping over the men. Besides, with just the few of us, how are we supposed to get our women and our grain back from that son of a bitch, the Great Chief, without numbers on our side? His words instantly rekindled the men's flagging spirits. Sun Ji, an impatient voice cut in. You said the Han tribe has conditions? What conditions? Didn't you say they treat prisoners well? 3 meals a day, with white rice for lunch. That's right. All the white rice you can eat, and 3 meals a day, regular as clockwork. Sun Ji nodded, then his tone shifted. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. The Han tribe can't just feed tens of thousands of mouths for nothing, can they? I got the full story. Captured prisoners have to work for the Han tribe for 5 full years before they can go home. Right now, during the war, they work logistics at the front lines, hauling grain, delivering supplies. The long and short of it is, you do what you're told. As long as you work hard, a full stomach is guaranteed. The moment he finished, the tent erupted. What? 5 years of labor? My heavens! In 5 years, my daughter will be old enough to marry. A scruffy, bearded man began to wail. I'm already 32. After 5 more years of work, I'll probably drop dead in Han territory. My ashes won't even make it home. Yes, Sun Ji, you didn't agree to that, did you? If they make us farm, that's one thing. But what if they send us up the mountains to dig in the mines? That's a death sentence. Exactly. If that's the deal, I'd rather fight to the death. A quick cut from a blade is better than being worked to death. Quiet. All of you shut your mouths. An older man waved his hand sharply, his voice hoarse but firm, cutting through the noise. What's all the panic? Can't you see how clever Sun Ji is? You think he'd be foolish enough to agree to terms like that? Let him finish. The men finally fell silent, their eyes fixed on Sun Ji. Right, right, everyone just hold on. Sun Ji played along, calming the crowd. Then, with a flourish, he pulled a folded letter from his sleeve and slowly unfurled it under the dim oil lamp. This is a letter of surrender, written by the great general of the Han tribe himself. I'll read it to you all. Hear me out, and then we can talk. He cleared his throat and began to read. The chief of the Xian tribe, colluding with the steppe peoples, has attacked our Han lands and slain our soldiers and civilians. This debt must be repaid in blood. However, heaven itself values life, and our leader cannot bear to spill blood wantonly. Thus, the terms of surrender are as follows. Sun Ji read with a dramatic cadence. The men were lost in the flowery language at the beginning, but when he reached the critical part, every ear in the tent perked up. First, in this war, only the ringleaders will be executed. Those who surrender will not be killed. Those captured will not be killed. However, all prisoners of war must serve 5 years of labor to atone for their crimes. The tent fell deathly silent. Second, those who surrender voluntarily shall have their labor term reduced by 1 year. That piqued their interest. Those who surrender voluntarily and successfully persuade one other person to surrender shall have their labor term reduced by 3 years. Whoa! A stir rippled through the crowd. Those who persuade 2 others to surrender shall be exempt from all labor. They will also be granted Han tribe citizenship, enjoy all the rights of a Han citizen, and be allocated fertile land and a homestead. Boom. The entire tent absolutely boiled over with excitement. This wasn't a path from hell to heaven. It was an express elevator. Sun Ji ignored their excitement and continued reading the even more heart-pounding terms. Those who report the whereabouts of enemy chieftains, elders, or commanders shall be ennobled and rewarded with 1 plow ox and 100 pounds of linen cloth. A plow ox. That was a farmer's lifeline. He who captures the Xian chief or any of his elders, Sun Ji took a deep breath, his voice growing heavy with emphasis, shall be ennobled and rewarded with 1 ox, 2 horses, a large 2-wheeled cart, 10 sheep, 2 pigs, and a weaving loom. Thwack! Someone slapped his own thigh in a fit of excitement. This wasn't a letter of surrender. This was a damn proclamation of staggering fortune. Capture 1 elder and you could go from a mudcake farmer to a wealthy landowner in a single step. The ox, the horses, the pigs and sheep, that creaking weaving loom. It was the stuff of dreams. Of course, they were all clear-headed enough to know that there were only a handful of chiefs and elders, and with over 10,000 militiamen eyeing them, landing a prize that rich would be harder than climbing to the heavens. But that earlier clause, persuade 2 others and be exempt from labor, was like a gleaming golden gate, thrown wide open for all of them. This was purely a first-come, first-served deal. If you were too slow and someone else persuaded you as part of their performance quota, then you'd have to scramble to recruit your own downline. The further down the chain you were, the fewer people there were left, and the harder it would get. Is that it? Someone asked, swallowing hard. That's it. Those are the terms, Sun Ji confirmed with a nod. Then doesn't that mean we all have a chance to get our labor waived? I doubt it. A sharp-witted man immediately did the math. Think about it. 1 person persuades 2. That means for every 1 person who goes free, 2 people are getting persuaded. The numbers don't add up. Someone has to do the work. His words were a splash of cold water. Hey, who said we have to persuade people from our own militia? A wiry man's eyes darted about as a plan formed in his head. We can go persuade those clan-bastard bamboo armor soldiers. Let them do the labor while we rack up our numbers. And what about those steppe soldiers? I heard their families are on the island too. We persuade them, and our KPIs are met. Easy. Of course. Why didn't I think of that? Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. We can also make some internal adjustments, another man added. The older guys, we'll just count them as our recruits so they get a full exemption. The young fellas under 20 are strong. Even if they have to split the difference and work for a year or 2, it's not a bad deal. They can even learn a trade in the Han tribe. Exactly. Sun Ji nodded in agreement. Work for a couple of years, learn the Han language, pick up a skill like carpentry or blacksmithing. You'd come back with a way to make a real living. Sun Ji's right. A man in his late 20s with several kids at home chimed in eagerly, more than happy for the unattached young men to go study abroad. So, is it settled? Amidst the clamor, the old man who had been silent spoke up again, his one question cutting to the heart of the matter. So, what about our elder Xin? What does he say? Has he agreed to these terms from the Han tribe? Narrators aside, look at that. Isn't this the earliest form of pyramid scheme recruitment and KPI-driven field marketing? The Han tribe's HR director is wasted on anything less than corporate training. As they say, a positive attitude finds more solutions than problems. These old boys have already started figuring out how to exploit the loopholes, max out their KPIs, and, in the process, get their colleagues from the next department optimized. The workplace, it's been the same since ancient times. Elder Jin's position is that there's still room to negotiate, Sun Ji reported, returning with the men's feedback. He told me to sound everyone out first. If you're all against it, he's willing to swallow his pride and go haggle with the Han tribe again. Negotiate. The old man's eyes lit up. Then what are we waiting for? You should have said so sooner. He slapped his thigh, his voice booming as he made the decision for everyone. Go tell Elder Xin that we were all duped by that turtle's grandson, the Xin Chief. The debt belongs to the debtor. This isn't on us. We haven't killed a single Han person, so why should we do hard labor? We're willing to help the Han army catch those clan soldiers and steppe warriors, but the labor must be completely waived. Not a single second of it. The old man paused, looked around the tent, and added with emphasis, we can forget the rewards of cattle and horses, but we won't give an inch on our freedom. His words straightened the spines of every man in the tent, their eyes filling with a steely resolve. That's right. Who wanted to be a convict? All right, I understand. Sun Ji gave a helpless smile, a glint of amusement in his eyes that no one else could decipher. He folded the surrender letter filled with KPIs, turned, and once again vanished into the impenetrable darkness, heading straight for Elder Jin's command tent. Old man, do you think the Han tribe will agree? Someone whispered in the tent as soon as Sun Ji had left. How should I know? The old man sighed, then clenched his fists again. But we have to fight for it. We can't just accept whatever they say. If it comes down to it, we'll do what we just discussed. Damn it all. It's the fault of that bastard Xin Chief and his cronies. They had a good life and threw it away to go provoke a tiger like the Han tribe. Meanwhile, in Elder Jin's, that is, Anvil's, command tent. After hearing Sun Ji's report on the public opinion, Anvil nearly burst out laughing. Heh, he thought to himself. The organization was originally planning to get a few years of free work out of these militiamen. Looks like the free labor plan needs a little adjustment now. Fine by me. The hearts of the people are what matter most. Do as they say. The abacus in Anvil's mind clicked and clacked. As long as we get those clan soldiers and steppe warriors to take their place, it all works out, doesn't it? At worst, we'll just change their labor term from 5 years to 8. Having settled the details, Anvil made his decision on the spot. He issued new instructions to Sun Ji and the other undercover agents. You all lie low here for the night. Go back and spread the word first thing in the morning. Say this. After a thorough investigation, the Han tribe leadership has discovered that our internal situation is complex and has decided on a policy of differential treatment. As long as our militia brothers are willing to surrender voluntarily and cooperate with our army in capturing the diehards, all labor will be wiped clean. After the war, they'll be issued household registries, given land, and will enjoy the full rights of Han tribe citizens. Also, I want you to heavily publicize the wonderful life in our Han tribe, our advanced farming techniques, how every family has oxen and pigs, the social benefits. In short, I want you to trumpet our prosperity and power to the high heavens. Make them understand that a good life is waiting for them if they stick with us. Finally, and most importantly, Anvil held up a finger. Tell them that as long as everyone is united, the Han army will lead them to storm back into Clearwater Valley and reclaim their wives, children, and grain. Understood. Understood. Sun Ji and the others snapped to attention. Good. Go get some rest. Anvil waved them off, then turned and left the tent himself. He needed to report this script update to Yangfeng immediately. The next morning, just as the sky was beginning to lighten, the moment Sun Ji returned to his camp, He was surrounded by his tent mates like a prized panda. How'd it go? How did it go? Did the Han tribe give in? They were all as nervous as students about to take an exam. They agreed. Sun Ji threw out the two words like a calming pill, instantly lightening the air. He then lowered his voice and explained in detail. The Han tribe said they misunderstood the situation, thinking we were all in it together. Now that they know we were coerced, they've decided to treat us differently. As long as we cooperate and help them take control of the clan soldiers and steppe warriors, the labor is completely waived. After the war, they'll give us household registries, and we'll have the same rights as any other Han citizen. Most importantly, they're going to lead us back to take back our families and our grain. I knew it. Someone slapped his thigh and laughed in relief. The Han tribe is so reasonable. How could they not tell black from white? But another man muttered, full of doubt. Can we actually beat those clan soldiers? What if we mess it up? Don't worry. Sun Ji clapped him on the shoulder, brimming with confidence. We just follow orders. Elder Jean has it all planned out. We're just playing a supporting role. The Han army is the main force. When the time comes, our big brothers from the Han army will descend from the heavens, and all we have to do is wave flags and cheer. Got it. He went over a few more details and finally announced. The time is set for tonight. At the same time, throughout the camp, the other Imperial Guard moles were rapidly spreading the exhilarating news. By evening, the militiamen had, as a matter of course, taken over all defensive and patrol duties. The clan soldiers and steppe warriors were more than happy to have the time off. The shadow of the Han army's night raid from a few days ago hadn't yet faded, and now that someone was eager to stand the deadly night watch, they couldn't have been more pleased. As they saw it, this was just Elder Jean sending the militia to be cannon fodder. That afternoon, these elites had even gone through a high-intensity training session, exhausting themselves completely. As soon as training ended, Anvil gave another order. They were to gather all their weapons to be centrally stored and watched over by the militia on guard duty. Night fell. The Tiger's Might Guard, the Sea Wolf Guard, and the Flying Bear Guard of the Han army, a total of 9,500 elite infantry, closed in on the clear green gorge encampment like three sharp daggers, silent and stealthy as hibernating beasts, waiting only for the signal. In the dead of night, the moonlight was like water. In the command center, after receiving the report that the Han army is in position, Anvil's arms swung down decisively. The operation began. Under the moonlight, the entire camp seemed to come alive. Countless dark figures darted between the tents. They were the very same militiamen who had been sighing in despair just that day. Quick, quietly, no noise. Sun Ji moved in a low crouch, like a seasoned thief, directing the men from his tent. Someone lifted a straw curtain, covering the weapons. Bundles of bamboo arrows were hoisted onto shoulders and carried away without a sound. A simple, honest man, seeing the arrows gone, tried to carry a bundle of bronze spears. But the bundle was unbalanced, and with a clang, it nearly crashed to the ground. Sun Ji, quick as lightning, lunged forward and steadied it, breaking out in a cold sweat. Careful, he hissed in a low voice, then pulled over a young man. You too, carry it together. No sooner had he arranged that than he saw someone else collecting the steppe warriors' bows. Move the other things first, Sun Ji whispered into the man's ear, his voice barely a breath. Without arrows, a bow is just a glorified fire poker. Oh, right, the man replied obediently, putting down the bow and moving to help with something else. Throughout the entire camp, tens of thousands of militiamen were carrying out this unprecedented great weapons move with methodical precision. They formed long lines, carrying blades, spears, bows, and arrows, and moved silently out of Clear Green Gorge, a quiet exodus toward freedom and hope. Narrators aside, this whole operation is a textbook case of internal collapse and pulling the rug out from under them. That old fox Anvil is wasted on anything less than being a multinational CEO. He's a master of dangling the carrot and the fine art of corporate PUA. Look at those clan soldiers, still preening because someone else is standing guard for them, completely unaware that they and their weapons are about to be packaged up and optimized. It just goes to show, never, ever piss off HR. They had just descended halfway down the mountain when a vast, chilling expanse of silver light suddenly appeared before them. The bright moonlight spilled across the hillside, illuminating a forest of steel. It was a legion of Han tribe soldiers in iron armor. They stood as silent as nails driven into the earth, their grim plates reflecting the moonlight in a dizzying glare. The tips of their spears and halberds glinted with a cold light that seemed capable of piercing bone. Mother of God! Someone in the crowd let out a shudder, his legs giving way. He collapsed to the ground with a thud, and the bundle of arrows on his shoulder clattered and rolled everywhere. The noise startled everyone nearby, making them think for a terrifying second that a silent Han arrow had taken one of them down. What's all the fuss about? An accompanying officer hurried over and kicked the man's boot in irritation. Get up, you useless lump. He lowered his voice, calming the men. Don't be afraid. Elder Jean made a deal with the Han army. They won't give us any trouble. Hurry up, keep up with the column. We'll be safe once we reach the foot of the mountain. Only then did the militiamen manage to quiet the frantic pounding in their chests. Silent as cicadas in winter, they ducked their heads, hoisted their weapons, and continued their stumbling descent. The closer they got to the base of the mountain, the slower the column moved. They saw the men ahead of them tossing their blades, spears, and bows into a single pile with a series of clangs and thuds. Before long, a small mountain of gleaming weapons had formed. As they drew nearer, they could see a squad of Han soldiers, armed with crossbows and sabers at their waists, standing guard with expressions as sharp and emotionless as knives, overseeing the entire process. Handing over their weapons, they were now completely unarmed, good citizens, and a fresh wave of anxiety washed over them. The column continued on in silence for another mile or so, until the path opened up and a simple camp came into view. Bonfires blazed within the camp, and strings of unfamiliar lamps hung about, emitting a dazzling white light that illuminated the entire area as if it were day. Good heavens, did they pluck the stars from the sky to use as lamps? The Xian tribe militiamen had never seen such a spectacle. For many, it was their first time seeing carbide lamps, and they craned their necks, their mouths agape, wide enough to fit an egg. Life in the Han tribe was just too bright. Even a temporary military camp was this extravagant. Inside the camp, bamboo poles and canvas had been prepared. Officers shouted orders, organizing the men to pitch their own tents for the night. Some were anxious, others curious, gawking in every direction like country bumpkins in a grand garden. Still, the atmosphere had finally begun to relax. At least they had a place to stay and weren't just being herded into an open field to await slaughter. It was a blessing in a time of misfortune. Xin Chief was quick with his hands. He and a few others had a tent up in no time. He called 2 of his comrades, and a short while later, they returned carrying 4 large wooden buckets. One bucket was filled with cooled, boiled water. The other 3 were brimming with golden cornbread cakes. Next to them was a small earthenware pot filled with a mountain pepper fish paste. The food wasn't fancy, but its spicy aroma was enough to make mouths water. Food. There's food. The cry was like a lit fuse on a powder keg. The men in the tents swarmed out in a rush, their previously listless eyes now gleaming with a feral light. One man snatched 3 or 4 cakes, using his other hand to scoop a massive dollop of fish paste from the pot with a piece of cornbread, and shoved it into his mouth. Easy. Don't shove. Xin Chief stood by the buckets, handing out food while shouting at the top of his lungs. There's enough for everyone. The kitchens have more grain than they know what to do with. I guarantee you'll all eat your fill every meal. Settle in for now, and once the Han tribe helps us get our wives, kids, and grain back, we're going home. His words finally put everyone at ease. They were given shelter and food. It couldn't be their last meal, could it? A man who had just taken a huge bite of a cake slathered in paste instantly turned the color of a pig's liver, his tongue lolling out. What in the world did the Han tribe put in this fish paste? It's like eating hot coals. He grumbled as he gulped down cold water, but once the fiery sting subsided, he couldn't resist tearing off another piece of cake, dipping it cautiously in the paste, and bringing it to his lips. Well, it's a strange taste, but damn it. The more you eat, the more you want. That was the magic of chili peppers. One bite, and you were grimacing in pain, quickly munching on plain cake to quell the fire. But in the end, You barely ate any of the chili itself while the cakes in your hand disappeared one after another, your appetite growing larger than usual. I heard the envoys mention it. It's called chili. A well-informed man immediately began to explain. Back in the Han territories, every family grows this stuff. Makes any meal taste good. Chili. A young man, now in love with the flavor, wiped the sweat from his brow and asked with hopeful eyes. So, can we grow it too, in the future? You bet we can. Xin Chief seized the opportunity to start his propaganda campaign. After this war is over, we'll be citizens of the Han tribe. I heard a Han quartermaster say that all of Bamboo Island will be planted with Han tribe grains and fruits, and they'll raise their livestock here too. Whatever they have on the mainland, we'll have it all here. His words sparked another lively discussion among the men. I heard the Han tribe's rice has to be planted in water. Where are we going to find that many paddy fields here? Don't you worry about that. Xin Chief waved his hand dismissively. The Han tribe government will take care of everything. They'll have people dig canals and divert water. If there are no paddy fields, we'll plant corn and wheat. No one will go hungry. And the government has plow oxen and iron plows. If you don't have your own, you can rent them. Huh? It's that good? Someone in the crowd asked the crucial question. So, do they take our grain, like the Xin Chief did? They take some, of course, Xin Chief explained. But I heard some merchants bragging that after paying their taxes, Han tribe families have so much grain left over they have to sell it for money and goods. So I figure they don't take much. Well, now that's a good deal. As long as there's some left over, a middle-aged man said with a look of satisfaction, savoring the spicy paste on his fingers. In any case, the days ahead won't be bad. Xin Chief pointed to the carbide lamps hanging on a distant walkway. See those? Those lamps? In the Han tribe, every family has several of them. My heavens! Does the tribe give them out? A young man exclaimed. Xin Chief threw up his hands in exasperation. In your dreams. You buy them with your own money. No matter how good the tribe is, they can't just give everything away for free, can they? What I mean is, if every family can afford them, what does that tell you? It means they have money. Xin Chief, what if I don't want to farm? Can I be a sailor like the Han people? A young man asked, his face full of longing. I've never even been on a boat. Well, Xin Chief scratched his head, fumbling for an answer. If you want to learn, you can sign up when the government recruits people later. As for owning your own boat, those things are ridiculously expensive, but maybe a small one. We'll see what happens later. Around the bonfires, a group of freshly disarmed militiamen, munching on cornbread and spicy fish paste, were enthusiastically imagining their wonderful new lives after joining the enemy. Noise and hope rose from the camp. And at that very moment, on the cold, iron-like slopes of clear green gorge they had just abandoned, as the last of the militia departed, the 9,500 elite infantry under Blooddrinker's command, like a great gaping maw, had silently completed their final encirclement of the 2,000 regular Xin tribe troops on the summit. At midnight, under a brilliant moon, the Xin tribe military camp atop Clear Green Gorge was as silent as the grave. Narrators aside, you see, sometimes conquering a group of rough men doesn't require a massive army. A bellyful of cornbread and a spoonful of mysterious, life-altering spicy sauce is all it takes. The essence of humanity, it turns out, is, this is delicious. The night deepened. A soldier, woken by a full bladder, groggily pushed open his tent flap. Hiss! A blast of cold air rushed in, jolting him into a state of sharp clarity. Something was wrong. It was too quiet. The camp was as silent as a tomb. Not even the chirping of insects could be heard. The patrols that should have been making their rounds were gone. The sentries who usually dozed off at their posts had also vanished. Gulp. He swallowed hard, the urgency in his bladder instantly suppressed by fear. Go relieve himself alone in the pitch black. He didn't dare. Clutching his stomach, the soldier scrambled back into his tent and began shaking the man next to him. Get up. Get the hell up, all of you. Something's not right outside. The man in the bedroll turned over impatiently, mumbling, What's not right? How old are you, kid? Need someone to hold your hand while you take a piss? Scared the Han tribe will sneak up and lop off your pig head. The words, lop off your head, struck the soldier like a bolt of lightning. He instinctively touched his neck. It felt cold. Something's really wrong. His voice was tinged with a sob. There's no one out there. The patrols, the sentries, they're all gone. It's like the place is haunted. What? Sleep vanished from the men in the tent. They sat up with a jolt. Those lazy bastards are probably hiding somewhere, slacking off. I don't know. Just come outside and see with me. Damn it all. Can't even get a peaceful night's sleep. A burly man cursed as he climbed out of his bedroll. Let's go? If this is nothing, I swear I'll beat the shit out of you. And so, a few of the braver soldiers ventured out of the tent together. After one lap around the camp, their faces turned ashen. The vast military camp was utterly deserted, save for their brothers still snoring in the tents. There wasn't a soul in sight, not even a ghostly shadow. We're screwed. Something big has happened, one of them whispered, his voice trembling. Quick, wake everyone up. They exchanged a look and immediately split up, rushing toward the various tents like headless flies. Everyone up. We've got trouble. The Han army is attacking. Before long, all 2,000 remaining soldiers in the camp had been yanked from their sleep. They gathered, a babble of voices exchanging information, and soon confirmed a terrifying fact. Besides them, there was no one else left in the camp. Some of the bolder men ran to the wooden palisade at the edge of the camp to see if the Han army was launching a sneak attack. Just as panic began to set in and the crowd descended into chaos, a hoarse cry echoed from the distance. A figure came tumbling and scrambling up the hillside, shrieking as he ran. The Han army. The mountain is covered with Han soldiers. They're coming. Boom. The crowd instantly exploded. Which direction? How many are there? The east. Halfway up the mountain, a black mass of them. At least a few thousand. The messenger panted, out of breath. What about the north? And the west? Before he could finish, several other scouts came running back from different directions. They're on the north side too. The west is full of them. Everyone was stunned, standing there like a flock of ducks with their necks wrung, their minds buzzing. In the dead silence, a sharp voice suddenly cried out. What about the militia? Where did those thousands of militiamen go? Son of a bitch! Someone slapped his thigh in a moment of terrible realization. Those bastards sold us out. They're the ones who led the Han army here. That's impossible. Would they have the guts? Guts my ass, another soldier roared. There were more of them than us. If the Han army was going to wipe them out, don't you think there would have been some noise? I saw a dozen of them sneaking over to Elder Jin's tent yesterday. That's right. Where's Elder Jin? As if waking from a dream, a few of the faster men immediately dashed toward the central command tent. The tent was empty. Not a soul, not even a single hair, was left behind. When the news came back, everyone understood. Elder Jin had taken the thousands of militiamen and fled. Not only had he fled, but he had also closed the gate and unleashed the dogs, leading the Han army right to them, offering up these 2,000 men as a pledge of allegiance to the Han tribe. And now, they didn't even have their weapons. They frantically searched for their swords and spears, only to find the entire camp had been stripped bare. Not a single blade, not even an arrow, could be found. A few steppe warriors stood there, clutching their useless, stringless bows, jumping up and down in frustration and cursing in their native tongue. Sons of bitches, one soldier roared in fury. We've been sold out. The elder ran off with the militia, brought the Han army here, and even took our weapons. They're trying to get us all killed. What do we do? How far away is the Han army? Find something to fight with. Wooden poles, bamboo sticks, anything. If all else fails, a couple of rocks are better than empty hands. The men finally snapped back to reality and began a frantic search. If they couldn't find a club, they dismantled their tents, using the support poles as spears. Those who couldn't grab a pole simply snatched 2 rocks from the ground. Hand-to-hand combat with the heavily armored, spear-wielding Han army, throwing rocks at them. It was nothing more than a final, desperate attempt at self-reassurance. Fear spread like a plague. Someone remembered their 3 comrades whose heads had been taken during the Han raid a few nights ago and broke down crying on the spot. We're all going to die. What's the use of being scared? Think of something. Think of something. What is there to think of? We either fight to the death or we surrender. Pick one. Why can't we run? A weak voice piped up. The men's eyes lit up, as if grasping at a life-saving straw. Run? Run where? The Han army is coming from the east, west, and north. So can't we just run south? For a moment, everyone fell silent. The south is a cliff, Someone shrieked in despair. If we jump from there, we'll be smashed to a pulp. Not necessarily, the man who first suggested running argued. Below the cliff is the Clearwater River. We can jump into the river and escape. Swim to shore and regroup with the main army in Clearwater Valley. Jump into the river? Are you kidding me? That cliff is dozens of meters high. Jumping from there is still a death sentence. He was right. The Xian tribe had chosen this location for their camp precisely because it was easy to defend and hard to attack. The cliff was a good 40 meters high, the equivalent of a dozen stories in modern times. Just looking down from the edge was enough to make one's legs tremble, let alone jumping. Besides, half the men in the camp were steppe warriors, a bunch of landlubbers who had grown up on horseback. Jumping into the water would just be feeding the fish. Among the remaining 1,000 clan soldiers, not many could swim, and even fewer would dare to jump from such a height. Even so, about 200 or 300 desperate men decided to risk it. However, when they tremulously crept to the edge of the cliff and peered down, they all despaired. On the dark surface of the river below, a fleet of small, single-masted sailboats had appeared, dotted like stars. At the prow of each boat, Han soldiers stood with divine-arm crossbows, the dark muzzles aimed squarely at the top of the cliff. The Han tribe had cut off their very last escape route. Fight or surrender, a dead end, or a path to life. P.S. A lesson from the workplace. When you discover that only you and a few core team members are left at the office, and the boss and most of the staff have already packed up and left, don't panic. Calmly check if the company doors have been welded shut from the outside by creditors. You see, ancient warfare and the modern workplace sometimes share the same logic. Just then, an idea sparked in the crowd. What if we try to break through? The man's voice trembled, but he tried to sound calm. Think about it. The Han army is surrounding us from all sides, but there must be a weak point somewhere, right? There are 2,000 of us. If we stick together and charge at one spot, even if not everyone makes it out, we might get half of us through. As for the rest, well, that's just bad luck. The suggestion was a lifeline, and the men's eyes instantly lit up. Yeah, that makes sense. Quick, send out more scouts to check the paths. However, the news the scouts brought back was like a bucket of ice water, dousing all their hopes. The number of Han soldiers was terrifyingly large. There were no weak points on any side. In fact, every direction was as thick as a city wall. Under the moonlight, the heavily armored Han soldiers looked like iron giants. Their grim armor reflected the moonlight, forming a dazzling silver ring on the hillside that trapped them tightly in the middle. It's over. The fighting spirit that had just been kindled in the Xian tribe warriors was instantly extinguished. They hung their heads, as wilted as frostbitten eggplants. But the Han army paid no attention to their psychological state. Exposed? It didn't matter. Blood Drinker waved his hand and gave the order, beat the drums. Boom, boom, boom. The heavy, rhythmic beat of the war drums was like the footsteps of death, pounding on everyone's hearts. The three armies advanced at a steady, unhurried pace, in time with the drums. Their posture, their presence, clearly spelled out 4 words. We're not impressed. The drumming grew closer, and the Xian tribe soldiers on the summit finally lost their composure. We can't wait any longer, someone roared. Brothers, charge. If there's no weak point, we'll make one. Every man for himself. Before he could finish, the vanguard of the Han army was already upon them. On the summit, there was a cliff on one side and a torrent of steel on the other 3. At this life-or-death moment, one man's hot-blooded cry ignited everyone's will to survive. Charge! The crowd swarmed forward like a disturbed beehive, chaotically rushing toward the Han army's western flank. But it was chaos. Utter chaos. All the officers, big and small, had been taken away by Anvil. These 2,000 men were nothing but a scattered mess. Some charged forward, howling, their hot blood rushing toward an unknown fate. Others, terrified, either dropped to the ground and started playing dead or desperately shrank back toward the cliff's edge, as if there was a path home behind them. One man, who had completely lost his senses, whether out of despair or a desperate gamble, let out a piercing shriek of "Aya!" and leaped off the cliff. From the 40-meter-high cliff, his scream echoed in the air for 2 or 3 seconds before a plop was heard from below. Dead or alive, no one knew. All they saw were Han's soldiers on the sailboats in the river below, poking at the water with long bamboo poles. Others were aiming their crossbows and firing arrows into the water with a series of swooshes. Judging by the scene, the chances of survival were basically zero. Back on the summit, of the 2,000-man force that had agreed to break through together, only a scattered 700 or 800 actually charged forward, without even a semblance of a formation. The ones at the front, still 30 meters from the Han army, eagerly threw the rocks in their hands as if they were precious jewels. Whoosh whoosh. A shower of stones rained down on the Han formation. It was, however, completely useless. Shields up. The voices of the junior officers were clear and calm. Crack. The front rank of sword and shield soldiers instantly formed an impenetrable shield wall. Stack shields. The second rank of soldiers immediately placed their large shields on top of the first, instantly raising the height of the shield wall. The third rank of spearmen thrust their sharp spears through the gaps in the shields, like a steel porcupine showing its quills. The last rank of spearmen, wielding ridiculously long spears of 7.5 meters, steadily rested them on top of the shield wall. A mobile iron fortress was formed in an instant. With a formation like that, forget throwing stones. Even if they had charged blindly, they would have likely given themselves concussions before breaking through a single crack. Thud. Thud thud, thud thud thud. The stones hitting the thick wooden shields made a series of dull sounds, a feeble accompaniment to the Han army's advance. The Xian tribe men threw another volley, which was just as ineffective. By now, the fastest few dozen men had reached the front. Yeah, a burly man, holding a broken wooden shield, slammed into the Han shield wall. Bam! The two sides engaged in the most primitive, barbaric contest of strength. However, one side was a well-trained torrent of steel, the other a scattered group of 300 or 400 rabble. The result was a foregone conclusion. Boom, boom, boom. The war drums behind the Han formation beat again, the signal to advance. The dense formation of several thousand men, like a giant, humanoid bulldozer, took a single step forward. Crash. In an instant, the few hundred Xian tribe soldiers at the very front were knocked down like bowling pins, sent sprawling in every direction. The sword and shield soldiers barely even used their swords. They simply swung their heavy, solid wood shields and smashed them down on the men on the ground. Bam! 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 The screams were instantly drowned out, and in the blink of an eye, the few hundred men at the front disappeared into the tide of bodies. Those who were slower, witnessing this terrifying scene for the first time in their lives, let out a cry of "Mama!" and scrambled back in a panic. From that point on, there was no more resistance. The Han army advanced like a breathing wall, steadily pushing forward until all the remaining Xian tribe soldiers were forced to the edge of the cliff. About 1,500 men, like a flock of quails cowering in a corner, had a 40-meter cliff and a river full of enemy boats behind them, and in front, an endless sea of ironclad demons, 3 layers deep. They looked at their own hands. The best weapon they had was a wooden stick. The rocks they had treasured just moments before had been lost in their suicidal charge. Despair, as thick and dark as ink, soaked into every man's heart. Forget fighting. In this situation, even if every man was a god of war, capable of taking on 10 men, they had no weapons. How could they fight with their bare hands? It seemed there were only 2 paths left for them. Either be chopped up like vegetables by the Han army, or jump off the cliff themselves and experience a bit of freefall. However, just as everyone was preparing to meet their end, what happened next left them all completely stunned. The Han army, outnumbering them several times over, at a distance of only 50 meters, had stopped? What are they doing? Are they going to shoot arrows? A young soldier, who looked no more than a teenager, asked, his voice trembling like a sieve. The man next to him was speechless, but he was thinking the same thing. This formation looked exactly like they were preparing to fire arrows. Forcing them all into such a small corner, unable to move, a few volleys of arrows would be no different from a machine gun strafing them. Was this going to be a massacre? But they were wrong again. Not only did the Han army not fire arrows, but under the command of their officers, they began to chant in unison at the top of their lungs. Surrender and live. The voices were perfectly synchronized, their power reaching the heavens. Clang. With each shout, the front rank of sword-and-shield soldiers struck their large shields with their steel swords. Clang! The sound of several thousand steel swords striking shields at the same time created a massive wave of sound that crashed over them, making the ears of the men on the cliff's edge ring. Several of the more timid ones lost control of their bladders on the spot. The spearmen in the back had no shields to strike, but their rhythm was perfect. As they chanted, they stomped their feet hard and slammed the butts of their spears on the ground. Thud! Clang! Thud! The two sounds blended together in perfect rhythm, like a death metal concert. The remaining Xian tribe soldiers, trapped on the cliff, were completely dumbfounded. They had never seen such a spectacle. What they had never expected was that the Han tribe not only wasn't going to kill them, but was asking them to surrender. Weren't they told the Han army was merciless? They had just taken 3 heads a few days ago. So, had the elders and the great chief lied to them? Or was the Han army putting on a show, waiting for them to lay down their weapons before bleeding them one by one? But then again, that didn't seem right. If they wanted to kill them, they could have just shot their arrows. Why wait for them to give up? Resisting or not, the result would be the same, wouldn't it? Plop! One soldier's psychological defenses completely crumbled. He threw down his wooden stick, wailing, and scrambled toward the Han formation. I surrender. I surrender. Don't kill me. I'll never be an enemy of the Han tribe again. I beg you, let me go. Sob, sob, sob. He ran until he was 10 meters from the Han formation, then dropped to his knees and shuffled forward, crying and crawling, his face a mess of snot and tears. The power of a good example is infinite. Seeing someone take the lead, the others who had long wanted to surrender no longer hesitated. They rushed forward in a great wave, afraid they would be too late even to surrender. Besides, they had noticed an even more pressing problem. With several thousand Han soldiers stomping their feet and banging their shields on the edge of the cliff, what if the cliff collapsed? Then wouldn't they, the ones standing at the very edge, be unthinkable? Unthinkable. Behind the crowd, Blood Drinker, Xue Qingyao, and Yang Feng, the 3 supreme commanders, watched the avalanche of surrenders before them, exchanged a look, and smiled knowingly. Xue Qingyao gave a slight wave of his hand. Instantly, the deafening chants and clanging stopped. Then, the impenetrable iron formation parted to the sides, creating 3 wide corridors. The spear and halberd soldiers on either side of the corridors tilted their weapons forward in unison, forming a welcoming gallery of countless sharp spear tips and iron halberds above the paths. Narrators aside, when it comes to warfare, the Xian tribe is still a novice. The Han tribe has already upgraded from physical attacks to a full-blown psychological offensive with lights and sound. It just goes to show that a well-trained, professional team can scare a rabble into surrendering just by shouting slogans and stomping their feet. This, my friends, is what you call a crushing defeat. Faced with the 3 corridors opened in the Han formation and the arch of death formed by the spears and halberds above them, the surrendering Xian tribe soldiers did not hesitate for a moment. Walking through meant becoming a prisoner, but at least they'd be alive, right? The corridors were narrow, only wide enough for one person to pass through. The surrendering soldiers were considerate enough to toss their wooden sticks and bamboo poles on the ground with a clatter. Of course, even if they had tried to bring them along, the imposing Han soldiers guarding the entrance would not have allowed it. At the other end of the corridors, the soldiers of the Flying Bear Guard had already prepared a welcoming ceremony. They stood at the exit, holding thick hemp ropes. 1 man out, 1 man tied, hands bound behind his back. 10 men were tied together in a string, like candied hawthorns, then escorted to an open space nearby, where they squatted down in neat rows. The prisoners who had just come through the corridors were initially terrified, but when they saw that the men who had come out before them were only being tied up, not summarily executed, their hearts settled back into their chests. When it was their turn to be tied, they were incredibly cooperative, more obedient than when they were lining up for their own meals. On the cliff's edge, the remaining men saw their numbers dwindling. The herd mentality kicked in, and who could resist? Fine, everyone surrender. The siege, which had begun in the middle of the night with Anvil's defection with the militia, had ended in a complete victory for the Han tribe in just over 2 hours. The most outrageous part was that in this entire battle, not a single Han soldier was injured. Their enemy, the Xian tribe, also had 0 fatalities, with only a few hundred unlucky souls bruised by shields during the breakout attempt. These were all minor injuries that would heal with time. Even the dozen or so warriors who had jumped off the cliff in a fit of despair were all fished out of the river by the waiting Han soldiers. Not one escaped, and not one died from the fall. After all, it was a deep river below. From a height of 40 meters, as long as you didn't land face first, the worst you'd get was a bit of paralysis. A far cry from instant death. It took until the crack of dawn to clean up the mess at Clear Green Gorge. What needed to be dismantled was dismantled. What needed to be transported was transported. As for food, the Han army was busy cooking up a storm, while the newly minted prisoners would have to go hungry for a couple of meals. Ideological education, after all, requires a certain sense of ceremony. First, a dedicated officer explained the Han tribe's prisoner policy to them. In short, food, shelter, and clothing were provided. As long as they obeyed and worked, their lives were not in danger. Next, a previous batch of captured veterans came forward to share their experiences. After a friendly and cordial exchange, this new group of prisoners completely lost their fear and became as meek as lambs. At this moment, in the Han army's temporary camp at the foot of Clear Green Gorge, the 3 leaders were huddled together, smiling. Yang Feng spoke first. "Great General, Quartermaster, what's our next move?" Xue Qingyao stroked his chin, pondering. "The specifics of the battle are up to the Great General, but I suggest we move fast. We've been out here for a while, and we can't let this war drag on into next spring. The chief is waiting for news from us, and we can't delay his grand plans for next year." Blooddrinker nodded in deep agreement. The plan for the year is made in the spring, and spring planting was the top priority for the Han tribe. They had just taken Bamboo Island, with so much good land. They couldn't just let it go to waste, could they? Taking land and not planting crops would be a pointless conquest. Then we execute the final plan. Blooddrinker slapped his thigh, his eyes gleaming. "Have Anvil take that batch of militia prisoners back first. Our main army will follow, and we'll coordinate with that Xin Chief to launch a pincer attack and take down the Xin tribe's main camp in one fell swoop." That's right. Sending the militia back as moles was a plan that had been hatched long before the attack on Clear Green Gorge. The goal was to have them replicate their good deeds from Clear Green Gorge. Of course, this time it wasn't about stealing weapons, but about turning more militiamen to their side for a much larger operation. And, at the same time, taking back their own families and grain, a condition that had been promised during their surrender. It would also allow them to plant more spies in the enemy's main camp, keeping a close eye on the Xin tribe's leadership to prevent them from packing up and running. But the act had to be convincing. Letting them go back so openly, even a fool would know something was up. And so, on the 30-kilometer mountain road between Clear Green Gorge and Clearwater Valley, the spy thriller of the year officially began. The scene was this. Anvil, leading over 3,000 fleeing militiamen, ran for their lives at the front, as if they had seen a ghost. Behind them, 3,000 elite infantry of the Flying Bear Guard pursued them with blood-curdling cries, as if in a life-or-death chase. And to the left and right rear of the Flying Bear Guard, the Swift Arrow Guard and the Sea Wolf Guard followed at a leisurely pace, maintaining a subtle distance. The vast army staged a scene of speed and passion in the mountains. Apart from a few commanders on horseback, everyone else was on their own 2 feet. The acting had to be realistic. If the mighty Han army chased them for half a day and couldn't catch a single person, it would be too fake. So, both sides ran for a while, then rested for a while. The militiamen at the front were truly running with all their might, but there were always some who couldn't keep up. These unlucky stragglers naturally became the spoils of war for the Flying Bear Guard. Of course, they were prisoners in name only. In reality, they had just run out of energy and were picked up by the men behind them. The Flying Bear Guard soldiers didn't give them a hard time, simply carrying them off for food and drink. And so they ran, with a steady stream of losses. The original force of over 3,000 militiamen had dwindled to just over 1,700 by the time they reached the outskirts of Clearwater Valley and were successfully received by the Xin tribe. Now, that looked much more realistic. The defenders of Clearwater Valley, after receiving Anvil's remnants, didn't dare to engage the Flying Bear Guard directly. They fired a few volleys of arrows from a distance as cover and quickly retreated back into the valley. The Flying Bear Guard, for their part, put on a show of milling about the valley entrance, appearing rather hesitant, then voluntarily retreated 3 miles and set up camp, creating the appearance of a standoff. That night, the second wave, the Swift Arrow Guard and the Sea Wolf Guard, also arrived quietly, sealing off the other exit of Clearwater Valley. Thinking of escaping over the mountain ridges? The Han tribe scouts were not to be trifled with. On the morning of the day after the Battle of Clear Green Gorge, while the main army was still slowly making its way down the road, Anvil and his tattered remnants had already successfully infiltrated Clearwater Valley. A much larger storm was quietly brewing. The 1,700-odd militiamen split up as soon as they entered the valley. First, they went to find their own families, spreading the word about the Han tribe's prisoner policy and the bright future that awaited them. Then, they had their families spread the word to relatives and friends, trying to bring all the militia families onto the same side. Meanwhile, the elite Han tribe scouts who had escaped back with the militia, like drops of water into the ocean, silently dispersed. Their mission was simple: surveillance. To monitor the every move of all the high-ranking members of the Xin tribe. To avoid detection, they kept their distance. As long as their targets were within sight, what they were actually doing was none of their business. Narrators aside, when it comes to acting, the Han tribe is a professional. They have directors, screenwriters, and actors, the whole package. The Xin tribe thought they were receiving battle-worn remnants, but they were actually welcoming a wolf into their den, signing for an extra-large Trojan horse gift package. For this performance, even the Oscars would have to give them an award for Best Ensemble. Those militiamen, now working for the Han tribe, certainly weren't idle. Taking advantage of the lull before any new orders came down, they immediately transformed themselves into a propaganda team. They infiltrated the other militia units and got back to their old business, subversion. The routine was familiar, but damn if it wasn't effective. First, they spread the truth, embellishing how the leadership was using them as cannon fodder, completely disregarding their lives. Then, they promoted the benefits offered by the Han tribe: land to till, food to eat, and a warm bed with their wives and children. After that 1-2 punch, combined with the overwhelming pressure from the Han army outside the valley, any sane person knew which side to choose. The situation, one could say, was excellent. The Han tribe's plan was ticking along like a well-wound clock. On the other hand, life for the Xin tribe was just miserable. Not long ago, in late summer and early autumn, the Xin tribe had been full of vigor, forming 5 mixed brigades and a grand army of 10,000. What a sight to behold! But now, of the 5 brigades, 3 were already prisoners of the Han tribe. In Clearwater Valley, only the last 2 brigades remained, about 4,000 regular troops, plus over 4,000 militiamen armed with hoes and shovels. However, these were just the numbers on the surface. In reality, according to the Han tribe's subversion plan, the 4,000 militiamen in the valley, plus the 1,700 insurgents brought back by Anvil, and their combined families of nearly 20,000 people. Soon, they would all be changing their household registries to Han. By that calculation, within Clearwater Valley alone, the Han tribe's inside men already held a crushing advantage. 5,700 defected militiamen, plus nearly 20,000 family members, against the Xin tribe's mere 4,000 regular troops? Was there even a need to fight? Add to that the Special Forces scouts who had already infiltrated, and the Xin tribe's fate was sealed. Certain death. No other possibility. With an absolute advantage, the Han army wasted no time. As soon as the Central Command tent and the supply train reached the front lines, Blooddrinker immediately gave the order. Attack. A probing attack. The troops blockading the 2 valley entrances began to move. They didn't launch a charge, but advanced with a steady pace, like 2 moving walls of steel, slowly pushing forward. Their posture suggested they were about to swallow the entire valley in the next moment. Swoosh, swoosh. The Xin tribe defenders frantically fired arrows and threw rocks, but against the heavy armor and large shields of the Han army, it was all for naught, producing nothing but a series of metallic clinks. The Han army's advance was slow. After all, the main purpose of this operation was to pressure the Xin tribe leadership inside the valley and create an opportunity for Anvil's actions. The battle at the valley entrances was lukewarm. but the fighting on the mountain ridges was much more intense. As the Xian tribe's main base, Clearwater Valley had a decent defense system. They weren't skilled at building fortifications, but the surrounding forests were riddled with all sorts of hunting traps. The tribe's leadership had sent out almost every able-bodied young man to form dozens of mountain patrol teams, attempting to use the traps and terrain to their advantage and play hide-and-seek with the elite Han scouts. The two sides went back and forth, the fighting lively. But overall, the Han scouts were having more success. The next day, when the Han shield wall had advanced to within 200 meters of the valley entrance, the Xian tribe leadership inside went completely insane. The two brigades had suffered heavy losses in yesterday's battle, and this was with the Han army only taking hits and not fighting back. Their armored troops were like bulldozers, pushing forward relentlessly. Even if you got within 30 meters to fire your arrows, you couldn't break through their defenses. It was no exaggeration to say that if you had a Han soldier stand still and let you hack at him, you'd probably get a cramp in your hand before you could break through his armor. Their weapons were inferior, and their troop numbers were dwindling. The Xian tribe leadership decided to call up the militia to fill the gaps on the front lines. However, what happened next nearly made their eyes pop out of their heads. The militiamen, who had always been obedient and constantly shouting about defending our homeland, now refused to be moved. Not a single one. This was unacceptable. The elders and the great chief were frantic, immediately sending people to find out what was going on. The result of their inquiries was a shocker. It turned out that the remnants brought back by Anvil had been spreading rumors among the militia, turning all of them against the leadership. With the decisive battle for their survival just around the corner, their own house was now divided. This was absurd. The Xian tribe leaders put their heads together and concluded that the problem must be Anvil. After all, he wasn't a native of Bamboo Island, was he? The Xian chief, unable to mobilize the militia, was furious. "Men," he roared, "bring Anvil to me." He and the other elders were going to confront this traitor face to face. In the main hall of the Xian chief's newly built residence, the atmosphere was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Anvil." The Xian chief slammed his hand on the table, making the teacups jump. "I made you an elder because I valued your skills and your contributions to the tribe. Why did you betray me? Tell me the truth. What did you say to those militiamen?" Anvil, his arms held tightly by two guards, stuck out his neck defiantly. "What they said, how should I know? Their mouths are their own. Can I control them? At most, they were scared by the Han army a few days ago and advised their fellow villagers not to go to their deaths. They're cowards. What can I do about it?" You. The Xian chief trembled with rage. "They're scared because you're incompetent. If you hadn't failed to defend Clear Green Gorge, they wouldn't be in this state." "I'm incompetent," Anvil sneered, stretching his neck even further, like a victorious rooster. "Huh. With that handful of soldiers and those pathetic weapons, you wanted to fight the heavenly army of the Han tribe? Is your head filled with shit? If you're so capable, why didn't you go defend it? You were just as scared of dying. Hiding in your home, putting on your chiefly airs, what good is that? Shut your mouth." Crash. The Xian chief's face turned red, then white with fury. He snatched a blue and white porcelain teacup from the table and smashed it on the floor. The platinum and gold elders immediately jumped up, pointing at Anvil's nose and cursing. "Anvil, don't think that just because you're an elder, you're something special. Take a look at yourself. You're nothing but a savage who once worked for the Han tribe. If it weren't for our pity, would you be where you are today?" "Exactly. If it weren't for your blacksmithing skills, do you think you could be called one of the 3 golden elders alongside us? Huh. Take a piss and look at your own reflection. What do you think you are?" The other elders, in charge of agriculture and construction, stood by with their arms crossed, watching the show, a clear, none-of-my-business attitude on their faces. Even at this life-or-death moment, these people were still forming cliques and attacking each other instead of uniting. "Ha ha ha." Anvil suddenly burst out laughing. "A savage? So what if I'm a savage? Even if I am, I'm still better than a bunch of dead men. When the Han tribe breaks in, we'll see who dies first." You surrendered to the Han tribe?" The Platinum Elder's face changed, his eyes filled with suspicion. The Gold Elder was both shocked and furious, blurting out, "Uh-huh, I knew it. I was wondering how over 5,000 men at Clear Green Gorge could lose so quickly. It was you who surrendered and betrayed us. And now you come crawling back, pretending, trying to sell us out again, aren't you?" His words sent a jolt of alarm through all the elders. The Xin Chief's face turned deathly pale, the finger he pointed at Anvil trembling. "Anvil, did you or did you not surrender?" Just then, Anvil, held in the middle of the hall, suddenly flexed his shoulders. Crack! The two guards holding his arms felt a massive force and were thrown off. Anvil stood up straight, surveyed the crowd, and laughed heartily. "Surrender? Ha ha ha! What a joke! Do I even need to surrender? I was always a man of the Han tribe. You. The Xin Chief, overcome with shock and rage, pointed at Anvil and shrieked at the guards in the hall. "Quick! Seize him! Kill this traitor for me!" But in the next second, Anvil, now free, drew the saber from his waist with a shing. He took 2 quick steps forward. A flash of cold light streaked across the hall. Swish! The next moment, the Xin Chief's head, still wearing its tall hat, flew into the air. The headless body spurted a fountain of hot blood toward the ceiling, then slumped back in its chair before slowly sliding to the floor. The head rolled a couple of times, coming to a stop right at Anvil's feet. Anvil, holding the blood-dripping saber, spun around, his gaze like lightning as he swept it over the stunned crowd in the hall. "I'd like to see who dares to touch me." Narrators aside, in terms of acting, Teacher Anvil has just given a masterclass. From the build-up to the final explosion, the emotions layered perfectly, a truly explosive performance. And that final line, "I was always a man of the Han tribe," is a textbook example of a villain's reveal. I suggest the Xin tribe leadership do some collective soul-searching. Why are your villains so easily turned? Is it the pay, or is there a problem with the corporate culture?